like looking at us.
Sweet. Well, I will go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to our panel tonight, and I'd like to thank you for spending your 5:30 on a Friday with us this evening. We have a really interesting panel. I'm really excited for this event. I do want to remind everyone that this panel is currently pending CLE accreditation. If you would like more information on that, I will be posting a link to which you can register or donate to Friends of Land, Air, Water to help put on these conferences in the future. But other than that, I will turn it over to the panelists to start.
Thank you, CJ. I'll be the moderator today, so I'm going to get started with a bit of an intro. My name is Matt Shretnick. I am the Power Resource Council with EWEP, or Eugene Water and Electric Board here in Eugene. Wanted to kind of get started with some kind of lay the groundwork, some foundational facts to level the playing field so we can all kind of start with the same information. Title, I should have started with that, Green Hydrogen and Grid Resiliency. So now we know what we're talking about. Green hydrogen is effectively defined as any hydrogen that's produced by electrolysis using energy from renewable or green resources. The process of separating the water molecules by electrolysis requires roughly 58 kilowatts of electricity to get a single kilogram or 2.2 pounds of hydrogen. As things stand today, the cost of that is about $4 to $8, depending on the efficiency of the electrolyzer in place. Resulting, that kilogram of hydrogen has about 33 kilowatts of energy, kilowatt hours of energy, excuse me. So electrolysis, start with 58, end up with 33. Not highly efficient, but you can do a lot with 33 kilowatt hours of energy. For context, in 2019, based on EIA data, the average residents in the US consumed roughly 875 kilowatt hours per month. So using a hydrogen fuel cell, particularly a PEM or proton exchange membrane, from that single kilogram of hydrogen, you could power your home for more than a day. For perspective, you got the Toyota Mirai, the fuel cell car, takes about 4 kilograms to fill it. That's enough to keep your lights on for 4 days. Looking at investment in electrolysis capacity, it's booming worldwide. We've got over 23 gigawatts of capacity in the pipeline to be developed by 2030. That is an increase of about 280 times what's in place today. Green hydrogen production costs have fallen by about 40% since 2015. We're expecting them to fall by about another 40% by 2025. The goal for kind of the tipping point from a cost and efficiency perspective is $2 a kilogram. Economic models today are showing that hydrogen is going to start displacing diesel for resiliency and backup generation, in addition to long-haul transportation at that point, trucking, shipping, et cetera. And it'll also, green hydrogen will also displace gray hydrogen, which is currently hydrogen where you separate the molecules in fossil fuel. That's used in steel manufacturing and the like today. So we've got the basics. Hoping to turn it over to the experts. I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and give a bit of detail. Don't need to do anything, no two truths and a lie or anything. Mary, if you would be so kind as to get us started.
Absolutely. Good evening or good afternoon. My name is Mary Morelands, and I'm the Director of Environmental Policy and Corporate Responsibility at Northwest Natural, based out of Portland, Oregon. We're a natural gas distribution company. And just very briefly, the reason we're excited about this is because we're a pipeline delivery company, and we want to deliver a decreasingly carbon-intensive product, and hydrogen is a really big part of that. We see it as a key solution to our company's future and the future of the pipeline infrastructure that serves our entire country and beyond. So just want to give that context, and then I'm happy to pass it around if we're just doing intros now. I'm sorry, Matt, I should be following better.
No worries. Len, you mind picking us up?
No. My name is Len Anderson, former naval propulsion engineer on submarines and been here at Douglas County PUD Power Company for the last 21 years. And we're interested also in hydrogen, mainly from the fact that there's times that we need to find somewhere to store some energy, and this turns out to be a useful process and good for all involved. So anyway, I'm a professional engineer electrical here at the PUD, and glad to be on board for this discussion. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much, sir. Stephen, would you be so kind?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Stephen Simmons. I'm with the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. I'm a principal energy analyst. Our organization, we have a fish and wildlife side and a power side. I'm obviously in the power division. And one of the things we do is we develop a power plan around every 5 or 6 years. And we're in a cycle right now. It's a long-term power plan. It includes forecasts of costs, of generation, of prices, a lot of different things. As far as my role, I'm a fuels and transportation expert, and I also do some of the load forecasting. But I'm developing sort of our initial approach in planning for hydrogen. So since we're a long-range power planning organization, any new developments around energy use or energy production is over the next 20, 25 years is important to us that we understand it for planning. I guess the quick summary is we're seeing a possible future with a really wide scale renewable build out, both in the Northwest, but more generally in the entire West. And so we see a lot of potential for low electricity prices out here in the future, and hydrogen production might benefit from that.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Jason, my coworker here, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Huser. I'm the Public Policy and Government Affairs Director for the Eugene Water and Electric Board. We're a municipal consumer-owned utility serving water and electric customers in Eugene, as well as the McKenzie River Valley. I think our interest in green hydrogen is multifaceted. We are interested in decarbonization and storage. We have more renewables than ever before in the region. Renewables are dispatched by Mother Nature, so there are times of great abundance and other times not so much. So storage would be very crucial to our region. Secondly, we are very interested in resiliency, especially on the water side of things. So our interest not only involves the decarbonization angle, but we're trying to prepare, especially if we've seen recent extreme weather events. We know a seismic event could be on the horizon. We're trying to be more prepared than ever with our resiliency for our electric and water systems.
Thank you, Jason. It occurs to me that I neglected to kind of signal why I'm interested in this, so apologies there. To Jason's point, and the point Stephen made as well regarding resiliency, so far as just electric reliability across the West is concerned, and UWEB specifically, we're seeing the need for longer term and longer range efficiency, or excuse me, storage than we're generally able to get from batteries given the available technology today or what is forecast to be available in the near future. It's about fuel density, and it's about ensuring that we've got the ability to basically keep the lights on and keep the heat on throughout the region if we have an extended cold weather event that happens to coincide, for example, with a high pressure system over the Northwest. And so we've got no wind, it's winter in Oregon, and so that no wind is also compounded by very little sun. And so the Mother Nature dispatch that Jason referred to gives us very little to work with. And so there's a question of what else is there, and trying to find those alternatives that allow us to basically keep everybody safe and warm, and do so without exacerbating the climate issues that we're dealing with today. We do have, doing some bookkeeping that probably should have started with. We do have some questions set up that we're hoping to walk through as a group and that I've kind of typed up. But it'll be real boring for all of us if we don't get any questions from the participants in the audience. So feel free to type and say interrupt at any point, but you can't. So just type, I guess, and we'll do our best to address them. So thank you all for that. Looking at going to ask you to elaborate a bit more. So each of the organizations that are represented here are responsible for resiliency and a resilient energy infrastructure in some way. Like my mic isn't working well. You guys having sorry,
You sound
Brian.
pretty good. You sound pretty good to me, Matt.
Okay. Sorry, Brian. Yeah, so everybody's responsible for resiliency and resilient energy infrastructure in some way. I'm going to ask Stephen first. Looking forward, you said you deal with transportation and fuels. Could you elaborate a bit on why green hydrogen and how it kind of works in with the theme of what we're talking about today? And you're muted, Steve.
Sure. Yep. No, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I can speak to a couple of things. Like I said, our initial foray into trying to understand where hydrogen can fit in has been a little bit more on the fuel side. So I do the transportation forecasting. And one thing we see is as we convert to, this is more on the low carbon side, but as we convert to battery electric vehicles in the light duty vehicle sector, we start to see what stands out then over time for as far as greenhouse gas emissions are more on the heavy duty freight, especially heavy duty class 6, heavy duty class 8. And so those become a pretty big component actually of transportation emissions out, if you look out 20 years potentially, as we convert to light duty to electric. So hydrogen has a good, could have a good fit for that just because the fuel cell being quite a bit lighter weight than the battery electric. So that's one thing on the transportation side. I think also we're looking at end use on the industrial loads. One of the things we've looked at is electrification of end uses that are currently using fossil gas or coal, oil. But if electrification can't work in everything, especially there's some industrial end uses that it won't, that hydrogen potentially could fill in. So we're looking at that as well. I want to say on the little bit longer range on the term of resiliency or resource adequacy, one of the things we do is we do a pretty sophisticated model of resource adequacy for the entire region, for the Northwest. And I should preface this with, I am not the hydro expert in our organization. We have John Fazio as sort of our hydro simulation expert, and John Olis is our all-around modeling expert. We have like a string of models that are all sort of interconnected. They seem to run our life. But so anyway, one of the questions we've looked at is, well, how could a resource really fit into the future power system in terms of adequacy, keeping the lights on? And what are those characteristics look like? And so one of the conditions that cause the most problems are essentially a bad water year, extreme temperatures, whether like a heat wave in the summer or a extended cold snap in the winter. And then if you start having generation outages or just bad wind or forecast error. So I want to point out too, we are using climate change in our work moving forward. So that's going to affect both how the hydro system's operated and also temperatures in summer and winter. But essentially what the hydro system does is in the models, it tries to flatten out projected outages. So let's say you have a really peaky outage, shortfall for a few hours. With the hydro, you can operate the hydro system actually, if you know ahead of time, to sort of flatten that out, but you may end up with a lot of little outages at that point. And that's where something a long duration storage is a really good fit for those. So if you could run something, if you could serve 12 hours, 8 hours during the day, during an extreme weather event, that would be very beneficial. And there are some long duration storage options out there. Pumped hydro is one, and but hydrogen could be here in the future as well. And that would be if you could store it and produce it, green hydrogen, produce it, and then store it, and then possibly run it through a combustion turbine. And of course, on fuel cells would also offer quite a few opportunities, I think, for resiliency as far as microgrids, backups to the power system for sure as well.
I like it. Thank you. The thing is, for all that, we need to produce the hydrogen, and there's really only one big, we've got a little one here in Eugene, or we're working on a little one here in Eugene, which we'll get to. But as I understand it, there's really only plans for one project of any size in the near term in the Northwest. So kind of hoping to transition to LEN. You've got the possibility of quite a few electrolyzers up there. You want to tell us what the plan is and what are you going to do with it all?
I don't know what we're going to do with it all. That's kind of a key thing. I guess from my side, kind of started about 10 years ago. I kind of pushed a little bit about investigating and looking at doing some hydrogen, because as you can imagine, the water is always flowing down a river, and we have our power supplied through a hydro project, so Wells Dam. And you kind of have to take what the river gives you.
And that's Wells Dam behind you, right? Just to...
that is Wells Dam behind.
Okay. Thank you.
So you kind of have to, yeah, that's, what do you call that? A shameless plug, I guess, the picture back there. So obviously you've got to do something with the water, and the water isn't constant as much as we would like it to be. It's obviously more in the springtime and when it rains and things like that. And those aren't always the times when you have heavy power demand. So it's kind of like the situation sometimes with wind power. You know, when the wind blows, sometimes it's cool, and that's not when the heaviest loads are, and some things like that. So anyway, so we started looking at that, and we've decided to move forward with that. We kind of felt a little bit of responsibility, as we aren't a huge utility, but we're kind of an efficient utility. We have very low power rates. We kind of figure if anybody up here could make a go of this, it should be able to be us. So
they're the lowest, right?
It's a little daring. I'm sorry?
Aren't they the lowest rates?
I don't want to brag about that. It ends up just bringing in a lot of customers who want to, but we do. We have the lowest rates,
Okay.
I believe, still in the United States. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't like to say that. So we end up with a lot of Bitcoiners and stuff that want to move up here and use up every bit of it. So anyway, back to the whole reason we were doing this. So we decided that we'll go ahead and use some of this power maybe and generate some hydrogen. So we've kind of done an initial layout and project where it's going to be maybe small to begin with. I have basically, I got to look because I'm kind of mirrored here. So anyway, we'll start with just the one building. We have a layout for multiple buildings, and we'll put a 5 megawatt project in there, but we can put 20 megawatts worth in each building. So, and that 5 megawatts can produce 2 metric tons of hydrogen per day. And the goal is eventually to get enough of the generation that it actually will help us to adjust load at the dam, so that we don't have to start a new machine. We can adjust the load here at the hydrogen plant. So anyway, so it makes some sense there. We're still looking for customers. So if you're a customer and you're hearing this, give us a call. But anyway, we have plenty of people calling actually, and a lot of interest, but not so many biting yet. But we should be, if all goes well, late this fall, early winter, we should be producing. So October, November timeframe. So anyway, any questions, I can certainly ask them. You'll notice on here, it's primarily what we have. We're not gearing up for vehicles, cars, or anything like that. We're looking at kind of being a wholesaler and filling trailers. So we're looking more for customers to take that and them to be the retailers, if that makes sense. So.
It does to me. A lot of, initially you hear that hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and it always will be, right? The idea that it's always 10 years out, but a lot of the issues seem to be chicken egg. You've got the cars, but the cars can't access the fueling stations, and no one's producing hydrogen for the fueling stations because no one's got the cars, and round we go, right? So I appreciate the fact that you guys just said, we have the opportunity to do this. Let's just do it and let someone else figure out what to do with it. But I like it.
I got a question here, and I suppose I could answer it. Apparently there was a natural gas leak somewhere from a LA's utility.
Assuming that's a reference to Aliso Canyon. And they were using, I want to say salt canyons. I don't know, Mary, you might know better than I, and again, you might not. But basically storing natural gas in the ground, and it came to be known that it was leaking out pretty badly. And I think, as we know, methane is a much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. I think the question is about,
leakage,
the Hindenburg
right?
link. Oh wait, here, now everyone can see the question.
I'll address a little bit of that, and whoever asked the question here, obviously hydrogen being the smallest molecule, it is the easiest to leak through any pinhole, any crevice it can find its way out. And that is one of the things that's been always difficult with hydrogen, is making sure that you can seal that up and store it at pressure without leakage. One of the things about hydrogen is because it is the smallest, it's also the lightest molecule, and it floats pretty much straight up. Everybody remembers some disaster years ago about the Hindenburg. I will point out, if you ever go back and look at that, it's not blowing up. It's not an explosion. It is a controlled burn. It looks horrendous because the thing is huge, and everything is burning straight up. And of course, it was bad for the people that were on board there. But one of the things that is about hydrogen, if you look at that and compare that with, say, natural gas, gasoline, something like that, gasoline would explode. It wouldn't just burn. And it tends to burn outward. So does natural gas. The flames and damage spread outward. Hydrogen pretty much burns straight up. So if you make sure and you design so that you are kind of clear straight up under areas, which is kind of the way that you end up trying to design things, it can be actually a lot safer than those other fuels. One of the hazards with hydrogen is being able to walk right into a flame, because you don't feel the heat off to the side hardly at all until you're already in it. So anyway, but it was an interesting question. But yes, one of the important things is to control those leaks. They do have some fancy methods now to detect. Hydrogen is pretty easy to detect if it's leaking. So obviously we look at the places that are the joints and things often to make sure that those are being taken care of. So anyway, thanks for the question. So hope that answers it.
Because safety came up, as a utility person, I have to address it. And I see some other utility people on here too, right? This is exactly why, pilots are important, and lots of research is being done and has been done to determine the best ways to transport and store hydrogen. So salt mine is a really good example. And also ensuring really good pipeline integrity. What kind of welds are the best for transporting and moving hydrogen? That is all something that is actively being done. It's underway now. So I think it's important to note that these are questions we need to answer. How do you move the smallest particle? There's a reason why hydrogen is, one, it's sort of the basis, right, of our periodic table. But at the same time, important to note that this is something that is being examined and is not impossible. We have systems in Europe that are operating safely and reliably. And the Hindenburg, while very iconic, we've all seen the pictures, is a unique circumstance. And we're definitely not looking at dirigibles, but more how we power our economy. And so I think it's important to think of it in the pipeline context, and making sure that that anyone who's going to be delivering it is under very stringent safety protocols and considerations.
Excellent point. Thank you, especially coming from a fellow utility person. I apologize for laughing at the dirigibles comment. You're right. That's not what we're planning at this point, nor is it under consideration to my knowledge. It's worth pointing out just the same. But from a safety perspective, I think we're light years beyond where we were when that was an issue, and considering different applications altogether anyway. But Mary, you mentioned the importance of pilots. eWeb and Northwest Natural are in the process of considering a pilot, and I was hoping you and Jason would be willing to tell us a little more about that.
I think absolutely happy to talk about it. I'm super excited to be on a panel where we get to talk about from both sides, the electric and gas side. So we are currently working towards a pilot in eWeb territory. So it's not quite as big as the project Len is talking about. So he definitely has scale on us. But what's really unique is when most everyone else on this panel thinks about hydrogen, thinking about how it is part of the future of the power grid. And that's appropriate, especially if you think about their job titles and where they work. That's what they should be thinking of. But then as a gas company, as a pipeline company, really, we're thinking about how our infrastructure serves the way that we look at our energy system holistically. And so this pilot is a really great opportunity where we have two cooperative partners looking at balancing grids, really, and thinking about how we best utilize the resources that we have. And so we've been in conversations for some time, but are really looking forward to seeing this come online. I will admit I am the environmental policy person and not the really awesome engineer who's been involved in the design components of this. So I don't want to promise technical things I do not have. But I think it is important when we talk about why this location is key and why this partner is key, is really the shared values and focus on decarbonization is why this is a really good pilot, because you need to have a willing partner. Hydrogen, in fact, for us as a gas company requires, when we're looking at green hydrogen specifically, we're thinking about power to gas projects, converting excess renewable generation into hydrogen. We need to have an electric partner that's willing and excited. And so that's where we are with this. And I will actually bop to Jason so I don't just get too excited and keep talking over our whole hour. But happy to go back and forth with you, Jason.
Yeah, I'll take that cue. And like Mary, I am not going to be building this project. I'm a University of Oregon political science graduate, 1996, go Ducks. So, but I can speak to a couple of things. First off, for eWeb, we've always taken a very agnostic, technology neutral approach to all energy issues and all strategies to decarbonize the grid, the natural gas system, and our whole economy. We really believe that's the only way you're going to do this as cost effectively as possible. And we can go to great lengths to decarbonize and still keep our energy systems affordable for customers if we're really smart about it. And that means using energy efficiently across all sectors. So I think Northwest Natural and eWeb, we do joint planning. We've been very interested in seeing the numbers on winter heating load, for example. And I think without that kind of coordination, we could easily do things that are not the most cost effective from a bottom line perspective. So we appreciate the coordination, and hydrogen has been a touch point for us to work together. I will say in the short term, our primary interest probably is resiliency. And I missed my cue during the introduction to expand on resiliency, but Northwest Natural has decarbonization goals and probably resiliency goals of their own. For us, we need a resiliency strategy because number one, we're a water utility, and we've been examining how prepared we are for a Cascadia event. And we have a single source of drinking water. We're actually the largest community on the West Coast with a single source. That's not good. You need a second source. We're considering building a second treatment plant on the other river in the area, the Willamette. But even if we build a second treatment center, we're not 100% sure what our water pipe distribution system will look like after a Cascadia event. Therefore, we identified a necessary strategy to have distributed emergency water stations around the city of Eugene. And of course, those require an energy source to power the pump. The easy way to do it, or I guess the status quo, most simple way would be with a diesel generator, for example. We want to be more ambitious than that. And we also know that there's issues with resupplying diesel to a generator. Diesel generators, I think, only run a couple of days. So we did actually do one pilot project where we did solar and battery. That's worked out okay, but we haven't been able to work out all of the use case. For example, it's been difficult to recharge the battery while islanding. That's a pretty crucial thing for a Cascadia event. So, we still think solar battery has some promise, but it's very likely that hydrogen will be the come from behind for the victory technology to help us solve our resiliency issues. A fuel cell with hydrogen on site could run a lot longer than the days that a diesel generator could. It could be weeks, even months of runtime without that kind of resupply question. So we see it as being very crucial. Mary, I don't know if we've told you this, we may not even wait for our local pilot project. We may put a fuel cell at one of those sites, and Lynn, maybe we'll be calling you to truck it down, the hydrogen, until we have a local source. But
Give me a call.
Yeah, let's do it. So that's kind of where we're approaching things. And then obviously there could be other applications. When it comes to a Cascadia event, we're pretty far from the major population centers. So when it comes to rebuilding the electric grid and getting transportation fuels down to the Southern Willamette Valley, we probably need to be prepared to be on our own a little bit longer than say the Portland area. So hydrogen, local hydrogen could potentially be a transportation fuel. And also it could provide options to do black start for some of the local, more traditional energy sources like the Seneca biomass plant on the edge of Eugene, or our dams on the McKenzie River. So we're very excited. We really think this is going to be a big part of the solution for us to have a resilient local system. Matt, is this a good cue for me also to talk about mass transit, or do you want to come back to that?
Sure, go for it.
I think earlier, it may have been you or Stephen, we did talk about the fuel density of hydrogen. That's a very appealing component of the technology for our local transit district and really any heavy duty vehicles. Our local transit district They're interested in decarbonizing. Right now, battery buses have the head start. It's a more mature technology, but the local transit district has found that their buses need to stay in motion for extensive periods on routes. They think they can only fully electrify about 20% of their transit routes in Lane County. And batteries might be a better fit for, say, a school bus. They can go have a morning route, then charge up in the middle of the day, go out on the afternoon route. But for the transit buses that are in more constant motion, our local transit district tells us they really think this is, again, the come from behind for the wind technology to decarbonize mass transit. And that energy density probably is a pretty crucial component for any heavy duty vehicles. Light duty personal vehicles, I think we probably can expect, while there will be some hydrogen light duty vehicles, but battery light duty vehicles, that makes a lot of sense. It's the heavy duty vehicles that energy density is so crucial to. And speaking of the Hindenburg, I do want to say that I was camping with my brother-in-law this last weekend, and he works in aviation for primarily helicopters, but he asked me, hey, what do you know about hydrogen? And I said, it's funny you should ask. So the aviation industry, they certainly see that hydrogen could be a potential fuel for the aviation vehicles of the next century too.
Hopefully not dirigibles. A word I didn't think I'd say once, let alone twice today.
I'll point out that I was in the conference yesterday, and they're testing some aircraft. Well, they're American-made aircraft, but this was in Scotland, and they've got them there using them as a. They have an airport set up just for testing aircraft that are hydrogen powered. Right now, they're working pretty well, and we've actually used some drones that are hydrogen powered in the military. So it's not something that's a pie in the sky. It's something that is actually being used today and just trying to get done. So.
Yeah, I would also follow up a little bit on Jason as well, like on the heavy duty vehicle, where because there's on freight, there's of course weight restrictions on the road for the vehicles, and so if you're the battery electric for those trucks are quite heavy, it takes a lot of batteries, and then it's going to restrict the amount of freight you can actually carry, and that's one of the advantages possibly a fuel cell hydrogen could really have, of just having a much lighter weight. I've been following for the light duty, been following the battery electric versus hydrogen for a long time. And hydrogen, it's one of those things that's been around a long time, since NASA days, of course, easily. And, it was like Toyota's, invested pretty heavily in it. And, one of the issues is you just didn't have availability to go fill your car easily, like with hydrogen fuel. That's at home, you can come home and you can plug your vehicle in, And so I think that really, battery electric clearly in that space is one, at least in the near term for light duty. But but it definitely has, I could see as well for the buses as well. It's a good application. And eventually aviation, as Len points out.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd like to address a little bit on just the bus thing. One of the things that up here where we are, we're in the Columbia River Valley, obviously River Valley, but it's not all flat, and it gets very cold in the winter and it gets pretty hot in the summer. They have gone to some battery buses here. They found that the battery buses work very well on flat terrain where the weather stays fairly warm. When it's cold, the inside of the bus is cold. People don't seem to enjoy that as well, because you use up a lot of your mileage on a battery bus trying to use that power to heat the inside for people. We have some battery cars here that we've been trying. Nobody uses them in the wintertime because first off, two things: they're cold. Second, they don't do well in the mountain passes. I guess it's because of all the batteries that are in them. They don't handle well on the icy road. So anyway, just a little bit of a plug for that. The hydrogen, the fuel cells do put off a little bit of heat. So kind of like your car now, that your internal combustion engine provides some heat for the passengers in the car. A fuel cell would do the same thing. And they're just as efficient on the hilly, hill country as they are on the flat. So I think you're going to see eventually that hydrogen kind of wins out, except maybe in those areas that it's just all flat country. So anyway, so sorry, just throwing that in. I didn't know if you wanted me to answer a couple of these questions, but you go ahead.
I was hoping to do two things. First, I was reminded, Jason said, go Ducks 96 grad. I'm a 2010 law MBA grad. So, it's nice to come back, even though it's virtual at this point. And so thank you for that. And thanks for the reminder, Jason. I did hope to kind of transition to answering a few questions. We had one that I was pretty confident you could answer easily regarding the how much energy does it take to pressurize hydrogen for storage? I believe you said it was almost a third of the energy to generate it. Len, is that accurate?
Not quite, but it's about another somewhere between 10 to 20% on top. It depends obviously on the pressure that you're going to pressurize it to. Our plant, we're looking at going to 500 bar, which is around 10,000 psi, and so obviously it's a little bit takes a little bit of effort to get there. One thing too, that when you start bringing in the mechanical devices, the compressors and things, you end up with a lot of additional maintenance issues. Compressors, I think if you ever talk to any mechanic, will tell you compressors in general are a headache. So they're going to be more of a cause of or a potential source of leak than anything, and they need routine maintenance. So so they're expensive. They're a maintenance problem, and yes, then you add to the cost of bringing it up, because you end up just having to drop the pressure back down eventually. So anyway, so it just eats into your efficiency. So but likewise, no one brought up liquefaction, but liquefaction does the same thing. Liquefaction is actually about another third. And that might have been what you were thinking of, Matthew. Yeah, definitely a very power intensive process getting it to liquid and keeping it that way. And the cryogenic trailers that you got to transport it, they can be hazardous, and they're also prone to leakage. So, and they have to be obviously built pretty fancy. So anyway, those are some of the issues we're dealing with. So do you want me to answer anything else?
Interesting. Totally up to you. I can take we got a question regarding, does hydrogen as a fuel require any precious metals as opposed to battery storage? I think it depends on what you're intending to use it for. My understanding is electrolysis does not, but for example, a fuel cell, the PEM fuel cells does. That's the catalyst there is platinum. Well, platinum is both a precious metal and rare. I think it's the rarest precious metal. So, that does bring with it certain risks and issues as well. But
today they're using platinum. Now they're trying real hard to find a fuel cell or the electrolyzers, which are basically just the same thing, only set up backwards, if you can think of it that way. They don't go back and forth, but they both use platinum, and they're trying to find.
I didn't realize that. There you go.
They're trying to use fuel cells or find fuel cells and electrolyzer cell stacks that don't need platinum. Actually, that's obviously one of the the magic items that they're searching out ways to do, because obviously then that would bring the price way down, because platinum is not only rare, but it's expensive. So
Matt, can I jump in on that one just for
Oh,
a second?
please.
Just a quick reminder that all forms of storage that I can think of, well, maybe not pump storage, but certainly battery storage is going to have a lot of the same implications. So just important to consider those things side by side. And I think we know that batteries are going to be really important in decarbonizing our economy. I think we do need to be cognizant, though, of the impacts of lithium extraction. It's different than rock mining, but if you look up the way lithium is extracted, it does have significant environmental footprint. In Bolivia and northern Chile, there are threats to flamingo habitat. Indigenous subsistence farmers who can't find clean water for their llamas. So we need to be mindful that lithium, we want to use it. It's probably important to save the planet, but we probably want to try to use it in the most effective way and not take more out than is needed. And so hydrogen could be, it's possible hydrogen could be a preferable approach to using a lot of lithium for batteries on the grid. They are trying to do zinc batteries. I think there's one company, EOS, in the East Coast, but that's the only company I know of. Everyone else, it's primarily lithium.
I did want to jump in briefly, if you don't mind, just what Jason pointed towards. There are impacts of different energy resources, and so balancing and minimizing the negative impacts by having an all of the above approach. Finding hydrogen for where hydrogen makes the most sense. Hydrogen can be stored long term in a way that can be really beneficial for that intra-seasonal storage or intra-year storage if necessary, to think about when we really need an energy resource, and being able to turn renewable energy into a storable asset that doesn't depend on battery technology entirely is a really big win, because storage is the question at the end of the day. In a year's time, you might be able to generate all the energy that you need, but you need somewhere to put it. And so I think that was just reminded me, that's kind of what we're talking about when we bring up hydrogen. It's not that hydrogen is going to be the only energy resource that solves all our problems. It is an important addition to the stack of solutions that we have. And that approach of finding the right solution for the problem is, I think, what helps us to get to that next step of consideration. Where is a battery right? Where is hydrogen storage right? When is a fuel cell the right solution? We need all of them. And I think that's kind of why this conversation is, I think, relevant to the folks who are spending their Friday night with us.
Mary, that was perfect. Thank you. Len, you were going to say something, please go ahead.
I was just going to point out that the amount of platinum used on the fuel cells and things isn't a lot, but it's only platinum. I don't know how the mines are with platinum, but at least on vehicles or buses and things, there's still going to be some need for batteries. I guess you could think of a hydrogen vehicle, and most people are thinking vehicles, even though hydrogen is used in much varied ways other than vehicles. But if you took an electric bus, for example, to make it a hydrogen bus, hydrogen fueled bus, all you do is take out about 2/3, half to 2/3 of the batteries. So they still have some batteries in it. So it's about 1/3 of the battery maybe. Then they put in the fuel cell and then a tank. So they use the same motors, they use some batteries. So it ends up being lighter, longer range, but they still have some batteries. It's like you still have a battery in your car no matter what you do. So just in fairness, you're not getting rid of batteries totally. But battery technology is also always changing. I think Jason kind of alluded to the fact that if you think back, batteries over the years, we've gone from some simple lead acid to some very different types and styles of batteries, and they're always looking at better and more efficient and cheaper ways to make things. And so, anyway.
Yeah,
Battery, sorry, Stephen.
oh no, I was just going to say about batteries. I mean, it's a different application. I think as far as not transportation, but as far as potentially for generation of electricity storage for the grid. So batteries, the advantages, the great things about batteries is their very fast response, and but they're short-term really duration. But another advantage is to them is that you have relatively small lead time to get a battery project on the ground, unlike a potential pump storage project could take many years. And of course, we don't have a hydrogen project yet that's providing energy to the grid. But so that's sort of the advantage batteries have right now. But it's really a short-term, kind of a short-term duration type application. I think one other thing too, I'd say as far as the grid, I mean, that if you think about all the potential oversupply that may be coming to the West here in the next 20 years, is another source would be for the hydrogen production could operate as sort of a demand response, a DR as well. So it's like maybe it's a load that's on during the middle of the day you're producing hydrogen. And so you're soaking up all the excess solar that's going to come up potentially from California. And so that also, but you could also, ramp it down if needed as a type of DR in case you needed to cut load as well. So I think it has that benefit as well, or good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think
and that's exactly how we're going to be operating it. I know there was a question about how quickly the hydrogen can respond.
I was just going to transition to that. Let's go ahead and no.
Straight man.
You're a step ahead of me, which I appreciate. We had a question about the response time for a hydrogen plant to go from not operating to providing energy. I think Len can address that better than any of us, but I also think it depends on if we're talking about, for example, a combustion turbine instead of a fuel cell. The answer is a little bit different, although not really all that much different.
In terms of power usage, there's different types of electrolyzers for producing the hydrogen itself. There's alkaline, and then there's PEM. Now, the PEM, you can think of that as pure electricity. So there's only water going in, electricity going in, and then oxygen and hydrogen coming out. So there's also alkaline electrolyzers, which use an electrolyte in there. Potassium hydroxide is the most common. So those are a little bit slower in their response, but the PEM can be almost, half a second, and you're adjusting your power level. So you can't go from start to 100% so quick. You can go about start to about 5% in a few minutes, and then pretty much from there you can adjust up to 100% just inside of a couple of seconds. So in that way, it's very good for peaking and demand response and things like that. And that was the reason that we selected this style mainly for our demand response, because that's what we're looking for with us. Plus, we didn't want the caustic, the potassium hydroxide, to deal with. So it just adds another complication. So we like to keep it clean, and so we did that. The other side of things in the generation, as Steve alluded to, turbines burning hydrogen are going to ramp up and down a little bit slower than a straight fuel cell. Fuel cell will be able to respond just like the PEM cell. Like I said, they're kind of just backwards. So it'll be very quick. And again, I will point out, I think we alluded to in the beginning that anytime though you go from electricity to the hydrogen and then hydrogen back to the electricity, it's a loss of efficiency. Anytime you have to pump it up and compress it, again, it's a loss of efficiency. So by the time you get all the way through the cycle from you started with electricity and getting back, it's going to be about, you're going to get about a quarter of the power back out, but it's still a use and it's a clean use. So, you know, as long as the overall scheme of things, it makes sense, and we're hoping that it will. So anyway.
Yeah, no, and to Stephen's point earlier, if you're going to be curtailing that resource and you can instead create fuel with it, and while creating fuel, create a demand or have a demand response resource that you can call upon, it's win-win-win. One of the questions I wanted to ask is because you do have more of the grid level perspective, I think, than any of us, Stephen, is kind of, you know, you can speak for yourself or the council here. I'll leave it up to you, but question being, you know, from a resource adequacy perspective, from a resiliency perspective, what's the ideal resource look like in terms of the future power system?
Yeah,
You
that's
could not
good.
answer.
It's a good question. And again, this is from always remember this. It's in context of a model, a simulation. It's a good simulation, but still a computer model. So a big key is with a type of resource, how it integrates with the current system, and mostly how it integrates with the current hydro system. And so it'd be great if it's not emitting greenhouse gas for one. It would be immune to sort of climate change, so it's not dependent on weather conditions. And then dispatchability is a real key to it. Storage is nice, especially for long duration. That is a ability to dispatch through an extended cold spell, for an example. And then fast ramp up and down capability. And ideally, it'd be sort of modular and have a short lead time as well. So you could stack some resources in pretty quickly over time. And then I would say one of the most important ones in this is just predictable and reliable. So yeah, that would be kind of the ideal resource in terms of adequacy.
Hey Matt, I bet we're almost at time. Can I just say something real quickly?
Bring us home, Jason.
On the policy side, things have been kind of slow on policy to help hydrogen. The local congressman representing Eugene, Lane County, Peter DeFazio, is the chair of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. There is no bigger fan of hydrogen than Congressman DeFazio. And we have a vice president, Kamala Harris, who is from California, which is probably the leader on hydrogen in this country. I believe something big is going to happen in the infrastructure package. So stay tuned. I think you're going to see a lot of big news about hydrogen. And let's get an I-5 hydrogen highway. Vancouver and California are doing a good job. It's time for Portland and Seattle to fill in the gaps.
That was a heck of a closing, man.
One shameless plug on right on Jason. Part of our project